Hey everyone, so we created a compilation of the worst, most publicized bear attacks in history that we've made videos on, and we're putting them into one video. This is for those who want to watch these straight through, or for those who have never seen our other videos. It's also going to be sort of a placeholder until our next upload, which may take more time than usual. Thanks everyone. Between Norway and the North Pole exists a gathering of small islands known as Svalbard. It's mainly just ice and barren rock, and just over 2,500 people live there. However, living alongside them are as many as 3,000 polar bears. Polar bears are very dangerous animals, and unfortunately in Svalbard, confrontations arise with tragic outcomes for both people and these bears. Almost every year, polar bears are shot due to encounters with people, and over recent decades, human lives have been lost and numerous people have been injured. This is the story of the 2011 British School Exploring Society expedition that resulted in tragedy. Earlier in the year 2000, the Svalbard governor issued a warning after several polar bears were seen nearby highly populated settlements. According to one Longyearbyen resident, a man sleeping in a cabin near the shore was attacked a few years ago by a bear which smashed its way in and grabbed his sleeping bag. Fortunately, he managed to fight the animal off with an axe. One airport worker who lives near the area said there had been a number of bear attacks in recent years. The problem is, when the ice melts, the bears lose their way and can't catch food. Most people don't really know how dangerous they are. There was even a day when one came down to the sea and people were running down to take pictures. They had no idea their lives could be in danger. Dwindling sea ice in recent years has led the bears, which usually hunt seals, to look inland for food. To prevent any tragedies, visitors are told clearly as they arrive, if you move into bear territory, you must have a loaded rifle and someone who knows how to use it. Arriving in Svalbard on July 23rd, a party of 80 teenagers and adult guides planned on spending over a month exploring the area. Amongst them was a 17-year-old Horatio Chappell. He was a student at Eton College and was hoping to become a doctor. Midway through the trip, Chappell hiked to the Von Post Glacier alongside a 13-person group with 10 other students and 2 instructors. The group camped overnight on a snow bridge close to the glacier, known for frequent sightings of polar bears. In the early hours of August 5th, a large but also starved-looking male polar bear approached the camp. The bear entered the camp around 7:30 a.m. and avoided all traps and safety guidelines the group followed to prevent bears from entering. The string of tripwires designed to trigger alarms and flares failed to activate. While nobody knows for sure, the most likely reason for this was that the bear knocked over a surrounding post, dislodging the cartridge that would have triggered the mines. At around 7:30 a.m., Chappell had just emerged from his tent and was in the process of standing up when he was attacked by the massive polar bear. After overpowering and batting the teenager to the ground, the bear mauled him around the head, face, and neck, killing him. It continued its attack, badly injuring 2 of his tent mates. One of the teenagers who survived was Patrick Flinders, who left with horrific facial injuries. He remembers that night very clearly. While he was sleeping, he heard scratching outside his tent before it suddenly collapsed. The fabric of the tent hit Patrick's face, and he looked up and saw a huge mouth snapping. There was blood all around the bear's nose. At that moment, he thought he was going to die. It hit Patrick with its paw, and then he felt its teeth clamp his elbow, biting down on the bone. Suddenly, it had his head in its jaws, and he could hear it crunching his skull. He said, "I could hear it crack, and then I heard a growl which was deafening because I was so up close." Patrick Flinders was left with fragments of the bear's teeth lodged in his head and later needed 20 stitches. Flinders said he lashed out and tried to punch the bear before the attack came to an end, at which point the bear let go and chased down another group member. At that time, warning shouts woke instructor Michael Reed, who was in possession of the group's only rifle. He later described taking careful aim at the bear to prevent hitting any of the young explorers, only for the weapon to misfire. Despite multiple attempts to chamber a round, the rifle still failed to fire. While struggling with the gun, he shouted to another member of the group to fire pen flares in an attempt to scare off the attacker. The bear then turned its attention to Reed, knocking him off his feet and biting his head. He unsuccessfully attempted to gouge at the bear's eyes, but was saved when the animal was distracted by a group leader, Andrew Ruck, throwing rocks at it. It moved towards Ruck and attacked him, leaving him badly mauled. In the time the bear was distracted, Reed was able to reload the rifle and shoot the animal until it died. An inquest into Chappell's death found that the group had opted for tripwire flares rather than an overnight watch or guard dogs, a decision which resulted in them being caught by surprise during the attack after the trips failed to fire. While it was ruled that the attack would have been prevented if the group had stayed in cabins rather than tents, there was no legal requirement for that step at the time. The group was also found to be missing items of equipment, including parts of the tripwire alert system. While Chappell was killed before Reed attempted to shoot the bear, the quality of the rifle they carried and the lack of training the instructors had received likely contributed to later injuries. It was found that training with the weapon was limited to just 4 shots per team member and basic instruction on handling. This lack of training meant that the instructors were unfamiliar with its safety operation, which prevented the loading of the rifle when the safety was engaged. Instead, rounds were ejected, matching Reed's later description of the incident. Police later disclosed that the organizers of the expedition had not assigned a night watchman because of dense fog on the night of the incident, and that during the emergency, their gun failed to fire 4 times because its safety catch was engaged. The injured men were trip leaders Michael Reed, who was 29, and 27-year-old Andrew Ruck. Also 2 trip members, 17-year-old Patrick Flinders and 16-year-old Scott Bendel Smith, were badly mauled as well. Polar bears are a constant danger of the archipelago, as the death of the young British adventurer has yet again proven. The worst animal attack in Japanese history, what is now known as the Sankebetsu brown bear incident, resulted in the deaths of 7 people and injuries to 3 others. It happened during a cold winter in Sankebetsu, Rokusen-sawa, which is some 18 miles inland from the west coast of Hokkaido Island. The year was 1915, and the world was at war. But in Japan, besides fighting Imperial Germany, the inhabitants of Sankebetsu Rokusen-sawa had a different kind of enemy, a huge Usuri brown bear. The bear had awoken early from its hibernation, hungry and looking for food. It began a killing spree that would devastate many lives. Due to the meticulous Japanese records kept since that time, almost all of the details of the events are known to this day. The Usuri subspecies of brown bear is found on the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido. They had previously been found on the largest island, Honshu, but were driven to extinction around the end of the last glacial period some 15,000 years ago. Outside of Japan, populations are found in China, Russia, and the Korean Peninsula. The Usuri is a particularly large subspecies, with the largest individuals rivaling the size of the largest brown bear subspecies, the Kodiak. Amongst the Japanese people, bears have a fearful reputation as man-eaters. During the first half of the 20th century, 141 people were killed in bear attacks on Hokkaido, with a further 300 injuries. Since 1962, 86 attacks resulting in 33 deaths have been recorded. It all began on a mid-November morning, when the brown bear appeared on the doorstep of the Ikeda family. This first encounter with the bear was scary but essentially harmless. It approached the farm, and while its appearance alarmed the Ikeda family living there, the bear departed after eating only the harvested corn. After it reappeared close to the farm on November 20th, the head of the family recruited his son and 2 specialist winter hunters experienced at killing bears to fend off this creature. On November 30th, they managed to shoot the bear but only wounded it, and the animal managed to escape, leaving a trail of blood. They followed the trail to Mount Unishika, but they didn't manage to catch up to it. Believing that it would not return again since it must have been deterred by the gunshot wound, the people put a stop to the search. The bear reappeared on the morning of December 9th, this time at the home of the Ota family. Inside the house, Abemayu, the wife of the head of the Ota household, was babysitting a baby. The bear entered the house, attacked the baby, and killed it. Despite attempting to defend herself by throwing firewood, Mayu was overpowered and dragged off into the forest and was later found by a search party, and her remains were buried under a tree in the snow. The search party finally located the bear 150 meters from the forest. 5 of the men shot at it, but only 1 bullet hit, and the wounded bear managed to escape yet again. The village was in a full panic, as people feared that the enraged and hungry bear would return for more human flesh. Many armed villagers came to the house of the Ota family to keep guard, and an additional 50 guards were deployed at the house of their neighbors, the Miyoki family. During the night, the bear appeared in the yard of the Ota family. One of the men took a shot at it, but it missed. The guards from the neighboring homestead arrived to assist, but by that time the bear was gone. Nobody could have ever expected what was about to happen. As well as the 50 guards that were posted in the yard of the Miyoki family household, there were also several women with their children inside, including Miyoki's wife, Yayo. Now, with the guards dispatched to the other house, the women and children were left unprotected. The fleeing bear had managed to get past the guards unseen and got into the house of the Miyoki. Inside, Yayo was preparing a meal while carrying one of her children on her back. When she heard noises outside, she went to investigate, but it was too late. The bear was already in the house. She tried to escape, but her second son tripped her in the dark and she fell, and while she was on the ground, the bear attacked her and bit the child on her back. During this attack, there was only 1 guard left outside the house. When he heard the noise inside, he opened the door, and the beast left Yayo and attacked him instead. While he attempted to defend himself, the bear struck him in the back, and continued with its killing spree. It killed Yayo's 3rd son, 2 more children, and a pregnant woman. However, Yayo somehow managed to escape and alert the guardsmen who were returning from the unsuccessful hunt. She told them about the attack. There were still noises in the house, which was a sign that the bear was inside. The guardsmen recommended burning the house down, but this was rejected by Yayo, who was hoping that somebody might still be alive inside. The guards then divided themselves up into 2 parties, one at the back of the house and one at the front. When the bear appeared at the front door, the confused guards feared that somebody might die in the crossfire, and the bear managed to disappear into the night. This beast that had killed 6 people in only 2 days had escaped once again. Inside the house, the scene was horrible. Only 2 children survived the attack. When the head of the Miyoki household, who was traveling the night of the attack, found out about the tragedy, he decided to contact Yamamoto Haikichi, a professional bear hunter. When he explained the attack to him, Haikichi was convinced that the culprit was a bear called Kasagake. According to him, this bear had previously killed 3 women. Haikichi, who had traded his gun for alcohol, refused Miyoki's request for help, telling him that he wasn't in the business anymore. 2 days later, a government team of snipers was formed, which eventually, after some persuasion, included Yamamoto Haikichi. They were intent on hunting down and killing this bear that was terrorizing the region. On December 13th, the bear Kasagake invaded the house of the Ota family yet again, taking all of their food reserves, then continuing on to ransacking a further 8 houses before returning to the mountain. The search party now consisted of 60 men, together with Haikichi. That same night, they managed to spot Kasagake and shot at it, but once again, they failed to kill it. A small team led by Yamamoto was assembled to follow the blood trail and footprints of the wounded bear. Yamamoto, who knew Kasagake's habits very well, managed to track it down under a Japanese oak tree. He decided to move with only 1 man accompanying him, and they got to a distance of within 20 meters of the bear when they fired. Yamamoto shot Kasagake directly in the heart, and with the next shot hit it in the head. The beast was finally dead. Kasagake was huge, and when they measured it, it was 749 pounds and nearly 9 feet tall. Soon after these tragic events, Rokusensawa became a ghost town, as many of the villagers left in fear of more bear attacks. So what was the cause of this killing spree? Many people believe that the bear woke up early due to hunger, probably making it more aggressive. Another problem that was identified was the deforestation in the region, a process which brought bears and humans into close quarters. Deforestation also chases out the bear's natural food source, leading them to search for food in human settlements. While most of the injured victims eventually recovered, the youngest son of the Miyuki family died as a result of his injuries 3 years later. The lone guard who had been mauled in the second attack returned to work, but fell into a river and drowned the following spring. 7 years old at the time, Okawa Harayushi, the son of the village mayor, grew up to become a famous bear hunter, swearing to kill 10 bears for every one of the victims. He retired at the age of 62, with 102 kills to his name. Today, a shrine stands close to the location of the first attack, including a recreation of the Ota House and a statue of Kasagake. Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park is one of the most popular provincial public parks in Canada, managed directly by the government of British Columbia, which is the westernmost province of Canada, present between the Pacific Ocean and the Rocky Mountains. It hosts the second largest hot spring in Canada, and a natural hot water river flowing downward to provide a phenomenal tourism spot for locals as well as vacationists. Besides its breathtaking realistic outlook, the tropical boreal forests also contain warm water swamps that aid the diversity of plants and animals to survive harsh winters where the temperature falls below -5 degrees Celsius. The biodiversity of plants includes a variety of ferns, orchids, and berries. There are also many animals that reside here, including moose, elk, and bears, which mostly go for ferns, berries, and acorns. However, it's always a possibility for an attack on humans. This unfortunately led to one of the worst bear attacks of all time that happened in Liard River Provincial Park on August 14, 1997. Patty McConnell, a 37-year-old woman, was traveling from Texas Paris to North Alaska to set up there and start a new life, along with their 2 kids, a 13-year-old son, Kelly McConnell, and a 7-year-old daughter, Kristen McConnell. Being excited for the new beginning, the McConnell family was on the road for more than a week and was exhausted, so the mother decided to stop and have some free time in the hot springs of Liard River Provincial Park through the cold weather, which was close to 0 even in August. So the family turned their drive off from the Alaskan highway and reached the Liard River Park at about 9 a.m. on August 14, 1997. Due to the ultimate anticipation, the kids and their mother did not wait long and jumped into their swimsuits to enjoy the hot springs. Spending the time there, Patty was watching the kids running on the boardwalk and jumping into the water again and again. They were having quality family time. After spending a while there, the family headed towards the upper pool, which is about 340 meters away, far into the woods, apparently hidden and sort of undiscovered. Patty had her 2 kids alongside her, but she was a bit doubtful if this decision was safe to follow up. Yet the natural outlook of the park was so nice that they couldn't resist for long and rushed into the woods. At midday, the 3 of them reached the upper pool. The kids jumped in and had some fun while Patty was sitting behind them and watching them play. After some time, the daughter, Kristen, got bored as no one was around except for the McConnell family. So she ran back down to the lower pool, where a group of people were also soaking in the hot springs. Kelly and Kristen had made friends there. However, Kelly stayed with his mother and Kristen ran back downward. Seeing her run desperately, Patty yelled at Kristen and asked her to slow down or else she would get hurt. But Kristen didn't listen and kept running down towards the lower pool. At this point, the mother got a bit worried. She, along with her son, decided to go back and follow her. Patty was holding Kelly's hand tightly as both of them rushed down carefully on slippery steps to reach the Hanging Gardens viewing platform, where they could see what was happening on the lower pool. Reaching there, both of them jumped on the platform after climbing a set of steps. As they were getting on the platform, Kelly noticed a strange rustling of leaves from the bushes behind the boardwalk. Still, the mother and son were so involved in reaching the platform to catch up with Kristen that he ignored the rustle and helped his mom separate the unknown plants from the board surface to clear the path up to the viewing platform. As they both reached it, the scene to the lower pool was visible, but they couldn't find Kristen. Patty got worried, and she decided to go further and find her. Kelly followed her as she jumped down the wet steps of the platform to reach the lower pool's boardwalk. But in that fit, something from the shrubs behind her caught her attention. She turned around to check and froze to the ground on the scene she had just witnessed. She turned around and froze. It was an intimidating male black bear looking at the mother-son duo while chewing on a dogwood branch. It looked giant, and the scene was just too horrible for Patty to digest. She was out of her senses for the first few moments. Her voice was stuck in her throat as she was trying to utter a word to tell her son, who was still looking on the other side to locate his sister. She hardly grasped the railing and whispered to Kelly to run. Kelly, on hearing about the bear, didn't believe it at first, but at the very next moment, both of them listened to a violent, heart-throbbing, and ferocious growl that was loud enough to make them believe it was real. Kelly, who was about 3 to 5 feet away, jumped out of the platform, but his mother couldn't. Seeing them try to run, the bear came out of the bush and lunged at the mother as she was literally an arm's distance away. In the next few moments, there were only screams on the platform. A mother yelling out loud to save herself, and a kid seeing a gigantic creature eating his mother helplessly. Hearing their screams, Kristen also appeared on the scene from somewhere, but no help was around to save their mother. Kelly, who was quite skinny in stature, was not able to watch the brutal act silently, so the brave 13-year-old kid jumped on the bear and kicked it in the face so he could make the creature get off his mother. However, the attempt was in vain, and the bear continued to chew up the mother's lower body. Seeing that, Kelly decided to find a weapon. He looked around but couldn't find anything better than a heavy tree branch cut off from the trunk. He picked that up with all his might and power and slammed it into the bear's head out of anger. While doing it, Kristen was watching the scene and was crying badly to call for help. The first blow didn't make any impact, though Kelly continued to hit the bear's face with the branch, especially the eyes, to cut off the animal's attention from his mother. After 2 to 3 powerful blows on the face, the bear growled at Kelly and lanced a paw at him. It hit him on the neck and injured him badly, but Kelly wanted to save his mother so badly that he continued to hit the bear in the eyes, which finally made the bear drop his mother's body. But it didn't stop. The next scene was more terrifying. The angry bear jumped on Kelly and grabbed him by his shoulder. It pounced on him badly on the ground and started attacking him. Patty was out of power but still alive. She wanted to scream and yell to call someone to save her little boy, but she couldn't speak a word. Fortunately, the horrible drama caught someone's attention. It was Mr. Ray Kitchen. He was a 56-year-old trucker traveling from Fort Nelson to deliver some packages. He, along with his 11-year-old daughter, Jolene, and her friend Sarah, decided to take a break at Liard River Park, just like the McConnell family. Kitchen was sitting on the opposite side of the park's famous Hanging Gardens viewing platform, where the horrifying act continued. After hearing the violent screams, he ran to check what happened. When he approached the platform, he saw a black beast chewing and gnawing on a little kid, while a lady was on the ground watching helplessly. He ran to save them. He also grabbed a fallen tree branch and rattled it against the railing, but no response from the bear's end. He then dropped it and tore a bigger branch, and pounced on the bear to hit it hard on the stomach. The bear was hurt, but also angrier, so it attacked Kitchen. After a while, another group of people appeared on the scene. The crowd desperately ran to help the helpless victims. A few also headed towards Kitchen and hit the bear with sticks, branches, and stones, but the beast was not going to stop. So a guy rushed to call the security ranger, who could shoot the bear with his gun. Through the struggle, a 71-year-old man named Frank Headingham stepped forward and kicked the nasty bear right in the face with his hiking boots. The blow was hard, and the bear immediately stopped. But this time, it was intimidated, and instead of charging towards Frank, it slowly moved back down the slope towards the lower pool, and soon was out of sight. The crowd didn't watch this unfold and were busy helping the victims. Kitchen was also severely injured. His windpipe was out and had severe wounds. Emergency help was called, but the ranger was still not there. They were all whispering to each other, and suddenly new screams rang from the lower pool side. The drama did not end. After the bear had retreated once Frank kicked it, it continued down to attack another visitor from the University of Calgary, Arie van der Velden, a 28-year-old research assistant who was enjoying some leisure time with his friends. Along with him, there were other bathers in the pool as well, but somehow they managed to get out of the attack. Velden also had some severe injuries, but before anything worse could happen, a man from the crowd grabbed his hunting rifles out of the car and shot the beast on his back, and then also fired multiple times on the front to make sure that the animal was not getting back up. The victims were all shifted to the hospital, where Patty McConnell and Ray Kitchen died the same day. However, Kenny McConnell and Arie Velden survived from fatal injuries. On August 22, 1997, more than 500 people joined the last offices of Ray Kitchen to honor his bravery and selflessness in Fort Nelson. The President of the USA, Bill Clinton, wrote a personalized letter to Ray's wife and said, "The heroism that your husband presented, coming to the help of Kelly and Patty McConnell, is an example of all that is good and noble in human nature." He was also awarded the Star of Courage from the state of Canada 1 year later, in September of 1998. The McConnell and Kitchen story is still one of the most highly rated stories of heroism and tragedy. The story of Timothy Treadwell, also known as the Grizzly Man, is a very disturbing and unfortunate event that involved a bear attack that took place at Katmai National Park. This park has about 3,000 of the total 35,000 Alaskan grizzly bears. As many know, grizzly bears or brown bears are extremely powerful creatures, growing up to lengths of 7 feet and weighing up to 700 pounds. But Timothy felt a connection to these bears, getting way too close multiple times due to a delusional mutual respect. For 13 years, Timothy Treadwell camped in several Alaskan parks, but Katmai National Park was a favorite, crawling and walking up close to bears and filming them, often attempting to touch both cubs and adults. In the 85-year history of the park, no visitor had been killed by a grizzly. Firearms are prohibited within Katmai National Park. Bear spray is allowed, however, Tim had quit carrying bear spray for protection several summers ago. Treadwell often established his camp on or near established bear trails. During his last season, Tim had also hid and camouflaged his camp at the Grizzly Maze within the thick alder bush in an effort to hide from the Park Service. Unfortunately, this is where it took a turn for the worse.
Isn't it smart to be as strong as the bear?
In October 2003, Treadwell and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, visited Katmai National Park. According to Treadwell's diaries, Amy feared bears and felt very uncomfortable in their presence. Her final journal entries indicated that she wanted to be away from Katmai. Treadwell set his campsite near a salmon stream where wild bears commonly fed in autumn. He was in the park later in the year than normal, at a time when bears attempt to gain as much fat as possible before winter. Food was scarce that fall, causing the bears to be even more aggressive than usual. Timothy and Amy were to leave the park at his usual time of year, and had actually returned to Kodiak on September 26th to store their gear for the season and catch a connecting flight to return to their home in California. However, after an argument with the airline ticketer over the price of altering his return ticket, they both made the decision to return to their campsite on September 29th for an additional week. Treadwell also wanted to locate a favorite female brown bear that he was concerned about. He said he hated modern civilization and felt better in nature with the bears than he did with big cities around humans. The bear he had been used to during the summer had already gone into hibernation, and bears that Treadwell did not know so well from other parts of the park were moving in. Some of the last footage taken by Treadwell hours before his death includes video of a bear diving into the river repeatedly for a piece of dead salmon. Treadwell mentioned in the footage that he did not feel entirely comfortable around that particular bear, and in the documentary Grizzly Man, it speculated on whether Treadwell filmed the very bear that killed him. Around noon on Sunday, October 5th, 2003, Treadwell spoke with an associate in Malibu, California by satellite phone. He mentioned no problems with any bears. The next day, as scheduled at 2 p.m. on Monday, October 6th, air taxi pilot Willie Fulton from Andrew Airways arrives at Kaflia Lake to transport Tim and Amy out of the area for the year, but is approached by a large brown bear. Willie states it was rainy and foggy out that morning. After landing, Willie believes that he sees Tim shaking out the tarp and yells for the couple, but receives no response. He decides to hike up the path from the beach and through the thick alder bush towards the camp after he notices a little bit of movement. When he's about 3/4 of the way up the hill, he senses that something just didn't feel right. Something seems strange. Willie then states that he turned around and headed back down the path through the thick brush, and just as he gets to the plain, he turns around and spots a pretty nasty looking bear, a bear that he had seen on earlier flights. It was sneaking slowly down the trail with its head down. Willie then takes off and flies over the campsite 15 to 20 times in an attempt to chase the bear away, and sees what appears to be the same bear feeding from a human rib cage. But each time he flies over the camp, the bear decides to feed even faster. He then decides to connect with 4 other park rangers, including Ranger Ellis, to investigate what had happened. After exiting the plane, the 4 begin slowly hiking up the path from the lake, yelling as they walk to help locate any surviving victims and to alert any nearby bears of their presence. The visibility was poor with a heavy growth of bushes and tall grass. The camp was located on top of a ridge and out of sight. One ranger turned and saw an adult bear moving towards the group about 20 feet away. All 4 began yelling in hopes that the bear would see them and move away. Ranger Ellis, armed with a handgun, began to fire at the same time as the other rangers, who were each armed with shotguns. They were able to drop the bear 12 feet away. As they moved closer to the campsite, human remains were then found buried. 2 tents were discovered, one for gear and the main one used for sleeping. Both were collapsed and torn. However, there was no evidence that the bear had pulled the victims from the main tent. In front of this main tent was a large mound of mud, grass, and sticks. After moving a clump of dirt, Ranger Ellis later recalled seeing fingers and an arm protruding from the pile. In the 85-year history of Katmai National Park, this was the first known incident of a person being killed by a bear. A video camera recovered at the site proved to have been operating during the attack, but police said that the 6-minute tape contained only voices and cries, as bear number 141 mauled Treadwell to death. The video was later analyzed by Alaskan state troopers. The first sounds from the tape are from Amy. She sounds surprised and asks if it's still out there. Apparently, either Tim had asked Amy to turn on the camera, or Amy just turned it on out of reflex. The point being, the attack was in progress when the camera was turned on. The next voice is from Timothy as he screams to get out of here. The sound of a tent zipper is then heard and the tent flap opening. Amy is heard screaming over the background sounds of rain hitting the tent, the wind, and other storm sounds, all mixed in with the bear and Tim fighting to play dead. Not surprisingly, with Amy yelling and screaming nearby, this seems to work and the bear backs off. A short conversation occurs between Amy and Tim as they try to determine if the bear is really gone. Being trained as a physician's assistant, it's believed that Amy made her way to Tim, and from the sounds caught on tape, the bear returns and Amy is forced to back off. Tim then is clearly heard screaming that playing dead isn't working and begs her to hit the bear. The sound of the rain hitting the tent along with the wind muffle the sounds at this point. However, Amy is clearly heard yelling to fight back. She is then heard screaming, "Stop, go away," as the sound of a frying pan is used to beat the top of the bear's head, and the sound of Tim moaning. It's believed that at this point in the attack, the bear let go of Tim's head and grabbed him somewhere in the upper leg area. The sound of Amy screaming very loudly as Tim is clearly heard over the sounds of the storm saying, "Amy, get away, go away." Tim knew he was going to die at this point and wanted to save Amy from the same fate. The audio portion of this videotape lasts roughly 6 minutes. During this period, Tim's cries and pleading can be heard for 2/3 of that time. He didn't die quickly, unlike some traumatic death victims who were lucky enough to drift off to a shock-induced dream state. Tim was obviously very aware and struggling desperately to survive during the last moments of his life. Unlike what is portrayed in the movies, the bear is nearly silent. Only low growls and periodic grunts are heard, which adds to the horror of the scene. Sounds of the bear dragging Tim off and the fading sounds of the screams indicate that Tim is being pulled and dragged into the bush and away from the camp. As the tape comes to an end, the sounds of Amy's high-pitched screams rise to a new level, much like what has been described as the sound of a predator call used by hunters to produce the distressed cries of a small wounded animal, which often attracts bears. Biologist Larry Van for the Alaskan Department of Fish and Game theorizes that Amy's screams may have prompted the bear to return and kill her. On Friday, October 8, 2003, 2 days after the investigators first arrived, a necroscopy of the larger bear, or Bear 141, was conducted at the scene by biologist Larry Van Dale, where it was learned that the stomach and digestive tract contained human remains and torn pieces of clothing. This event is a very tragic and unfortunate one that could have been avoided, but nonetheless is one of the most disturbing stories anyone has ever heard.